You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Men do not menstruate.
Some women have penises, right? Some men have vaginas.
Oh man, you don't want a grandkid? No problem. Oh man, well you're a weak man, dude.
LGBTQIA+++, and then we included men who dress up like women and mock women, like influencer Dylan Mulvaney.
Everything Manly Podcast is a place where men can come to be taught and encouraged to think and act like men in a world where men are being feminized. John and Tommy are two men who want to encourage men how to think and act in a feminized world. Hey guys, welcome to another Everything Manly podcast. John, thanks for joining me again.
Yeah, man, excited.
We are sorry we cannot be more consistent, but if you guys sitting behind the camera are watching this or listening to this would understand how life throws many different things at pastors and ministers. You'd understand why we're doing the best we can right now through these months. But today's topic, we're going to be talking about the topic of men and friendship, the importance of it. We're going to be looking at some principles I think that are important, and then we're going to be looking at the person and work of Jesus, because we're Christian men. We want to be able to look at him and go, okay, what are some of the attributes that he had? Because he said, no greater love than this, that man will lay his life down for his friends. Yeah. And so we're going to look briefly at the life of Christ and how he considered the importance of friendship in his life. But let's just start off with this the main principle here, the importance of men and friendship. What are your top two or three that you think are important for men?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of the reasons why I feel like that men need to have, at least a handful of close male friends is because otherwise our natural tendency is going to be independent. Yeah. And we don't want to seem vulnerable. We don't want to seem like we need any help or that we need support. And so I think part of as you mature, you realize that's probably an unwise path. Like just for the long term, right? In the moment, sure, you can probably get by from day to day with something and not have a friend help you. But but in the long term, I think as you grow and you age and you mature, you realize that having some strong men that are supporters and faithful to help you, and guys that are looking out for your best interest, it's a wise path to take. And so for me, I think that it's wise to cultivate that as we grow. In my case, I mean, I'm married, I know you are, and so, our lives change, our relationships change, but yet still having that group of guys that you can feel like, this guy's going to help me out in these moments is helpful. And so I think it's a wise thing for us to do and to say, I need to invest in something that's going to be long term, not just, avoiding that, but investing in that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think for me this is an important topic. Yeah. I'm not the best at it. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I mean, I'm a super independent guy. Like I don't need any help. I'll fix it myself.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I realize, that's not the best way to go.
I'm similar to you. I am an independent person, and I'm not trying to excuse that.
Right.
But I think that is a strength that God has given men.
It is, yeah.
To take the bull by the horns, to make something happen.
Yeah.
And that is a God-given gift. Some men are more naturally inclined to take the bull by the horns and make things happen. But at the same time, I think it can be a detriment. I think it can be Achilles' heel for men too, because just like you said, you used the term investing in friendships. And I think that's a huge point to understand, that although men have a tendency to be strong and to be individualistic and to we're the majority of businesses and companies that are run by men, and I think God has designed men that way to be independent thinkers, just to make things happen. But at the same time, I think it can be a huge detriment or Achilles heel to us when we think, okay, well, I can do this all by myself.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it by ourselves. Right. That we need a community of people around us. I have learned as I've gone through my life, I need other men in my life.
Sure.
I need people to help encourage me. I need people to help teach me to be resilient. I need men to help teach me, hey man, be committed. I mean, just something as small as doing this podcast. I mean, I'm not going to toot your horn, but dude, you've got a lot going on. But yet you still said, yeah, we can knock it out here today. And that's just a good attribute of a man. Hey man, we're committed to something. Let's just see it through, right?
Sure,
and
sure.
Those aren't bad things, but we need other men to come alongside us and help teach us and help equip us and to also help us realize that your society, and this is the one reason why we wanted to start this whole podcast. Your society is going to try to push you into a mold and try to make you something that it wants you to be. But being a man is sometimes the opposite of what your culture is telling you.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
And so we need these other men.
And I think too, like in as much as it is me saying I need other men to help me and to guide me, I would say for guys in my age group, you know, I feel like there's something that we have to offer as well, right?
Sure.
That it's not just, I mean, of course, there's the guy that's got me about 30 or 40 years that can teach me some stuff.
Sure.
But there's also some stuff that, you know, I look at this younger generation of guys that are coming up, and I realize we've got some things that we can offer them. And so I think one of the things that we can do, and particularly as Christian men, but is that we can look at these younger guys, these guys 18, 20, 25-year-old guys, and say, you know what, like, I know exactly what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're going through.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, I've got 20, 25 years on you. Let me share with you some things that help me through that and these different seasons of life. And I think that different friendships play different roles in different seasons too. You know, there's going to be times where it's a marriage thing or a kid, you know, your kids and stuff, or whether it's church relationships or work relationships. Yeah. And you're going to find certain people that are like really going to help you through them. And so I think that we can offer some stuff and we can also receive. And so I think there's a benefit on both sides of that.
Yeah. Because I was listening to a young person the other day, and they were talking about some relationships, and they were saying that one of their friends that they were talking with, they were like, "Listen, I don't want to bother other people with my burdens." Yeah. And that's just the opposite of the way they need to think, right? That they're not burdening anybody with their burdens, that they need to come and to share so that they can get advice, they can get wisdom, they can get insight to how to navigate the situation that they're going through in life. That's one thing about the independent male is we can easily default to that and isolate ourselves. When we don't need to isolate ourselves, we need to be a part of a small group. And I think you made that point in the beginning that you need a handful of good friends, right? I'm not going to go out. My personality is not like this. I'm not going to go out and have this deep, meaningful relationship with 25, 30 men. I just can't do it. Now, I know these people, but for me to invite them into my life and to go deep with them, it's just not going to happen. There are just a few people on my hands that I know that I can call, I can spend time with, and they know me, I know them, and we can be honest and real about anything. And some of them are men that I don't get to see a whole lot,
right? Because
just once again, different seasons of life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think you don't need to be hearing John and I saying, and John, if you disagree with me, please tell me, that you're going to have these deep, abiding relationships with 25, 30 men in your life. You're just not. I don't think
it's realistic. I think, I've tried to. I've even had these conversations with my kids, and just to say at times where you get so bent out of shape at a young age. You're in high school, and you're like this friendship just having issues and all this kind of stuff, and it's just the time that you've lived. You go, you know what? At the end of the day, you're going to survive those events, and you're probably not going to maintain some of those friendships, not in a meaningful way.
Sure.
I mean, you'll always be acquaintances, but I was like, that's probably not going to be the thing. And very few people probably have that kid who's like, oh yeah, I've been a friend since kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
I think what happens is most of us realize we develop those small groups of friends that, for whatever reason, there's something about us that connects. And I think about those kind of things where you're like, who you're going to call in those moments of life that you really need.
Mm-hmm.
As they say, who you go call at 3 a.m, that kind of thing.
That's right.
Those kind of things. And some of that would be, like in my case, my brothers. my my biological brothers,
Sure.
but they're my friends, right? And so God's put those guys in my life, in that season. But there's also other guys that I could think of in the same way. And like you say, I mean, I'm in a position where I know lots of people, but I wouldn't view them as deep, friendships.
Sure.
And so I think that's where I think we got to be content with. That's what I'm saying. So we just got to be content with the idea that, okay, if I can count them on one hand, that's a pretty good life.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's a really good thing to say I got through, and there's some guys I could count on like that.
And not to look at someone who's not reciprocating a friendship, or someone you want to be a friend with, but they're just too busy. Don't get mad about that. Just go, you know what? Hey, that's life.
That's
it
what it is,
happens. Maybe I can go somewhere else. I mean, I remember when I was younger in my faith, there's this one person I really wanted to mentor me, and I came to him, asked. He said, "Yeah, let me get back with you." And he came to me about probably 2 or 3 weeks later, and he's like, I'm just be honest with you. I'm just too busy right now. I just don't have the bandwidth to pour into you.
Yeah.
And looking back at that, at first I was like, ouch. But, man, he was looking out for me, and he was looking out for himself, right? He didn't want me to have these preconceived ideas about him, and then he wasn't going to be able to meet them.
Right. He wouldn't meet those expectations.
And then it made me move on and go, okay, well, let me find someone who can really help mentor me. And so that's... Don't forget that younger man who's looking for men to be friends with, or looking for someone to mentor you in the faith or mentor you in life as a man. Men don't have but a certain amount of bandwidth, especially if they have family and they have kids, and they have work or ministry or whatever it may be. And I think that is the importance of coming back to being able to count your good friends on one hand. Yeah.
And I think that's a good point too that you kind of alluded to that, and I've seen this in my life as I've transitioned into different seasons of ministry, being a minister, but where I've been working in student ministry or working in associate type stuff or senior pastorate, but give grace to people,
please,
where you're like, you know what. You find people sometimes who just, like you say, they expect so much, and you go, but I just can't physically squeeze that in, And so I look at that now, seeing my life speed up, and I go, you know what? Like I realize now, like you're saying, where there are other people that I'm like, man, why did that guy, why didn't he show up to the event, or why didn't he come to do the one thing I want him to do? And you go, well, because he was busy, but it wasn't because it was personal, it wasn't against me. And so I think part of this too for me, as I've grown in these areas, is just to say, man, I'm gonna give people space and say, I'm here, I'm available. And like you say, if I see you every week, that's one kind of friendship.
Yeah.
But there's some people I might see once every 6 months, once a year.
Yeah.
And we pick up right where we left off. And I think that's an okay thing. And I think coming to terms with that as you mature, you go, okay, that's okay. But if you're the kind of person that's super needy, and you just gotta have somebody all the time, man, that's hard to maintain that in the real world, I think.
Can I just be honest at this point in time and on this Everything Manly podcast? I'm going to tell you to suck it up, man, because that's not life. That's just not life.
You know what I mean? But you meet people like that. They're like, if you can't give them that kind of time, they just get really upset. And I'm like, man, I don't think it's very realistic.
Yeah, just get over yourself.
And I think looking at other people, like, I feel like, man, give them some grace and say, what, they're not, it's nothing bad. It's just they can't give you the time,
Yeah, and if you can't get over that, then I think there's some stuff going on inside of you. You need to reconcile.
Something else.
You need to reconcile. Yeah,
sure.
So some qualities of strong male friendship. What do you think are some good qualities of a friendship that would say, okay, this is a good friendship?
Well, we've talked about this in other podcasts. I think at least at some level, and it doesn't have to be very rigid or wooden, but at some level, some kind of accountability, where I feel like if I'm going to put somebody at that level where I feel like, man, this is a guy that I would consider a close friend, I would feel some level of accountability to them, right? Like my actions matter to them, my choices, my behavior.
Yeah.
Like in the back of my mind, I'd go, did what I just do, would that be, something they're ashamed of or proud of? Like I kind of would gauge, how involved is our relationship as a friend? And I mean, there's some people and I don't mean this bad, but just say, it don't really matter to me what they think.
Yeah.
But there's other people I'd go, I feel really accountable to. I go, yeah, that would really hurt. It would matter what they think. And so I think that having some people like that where you're accountable to them and they're accountable to you, I think would be an important quality that I'd want to have somebody that had that level of respect, you know.
And when you have a friend that you're being transparent with, you're being accountable to, and it just kind of naturally happens.
Yeah.
Or either you guys are intentionally doing this.
Yeah.
You respect their feedback because they've been transparent with you. You've been transparent with them. You know them as a person. You respect them because if they were a liar or cheat or thief, we talked about this in another podcast. You wouldn't have them in your life. Right? Therefore, they definitely you respect their opinion and what they say to you. Yeah. And especially there's some men that I have in my life. They don't say many words, but man, when they speak up, I really pay attention.
You want to listen,
You know? Yeah, I really pay attention.
And I've got some guys like that too that I consider friends that I'll have those conversations with because I know out of all I'll go through in my mental Rolodex of who could I talk about this with, and I know if I tell that guy, he's not going to say a lie, but he's going to tell me the truth. Yeah. And I can respect that. So yeah, it's good to have somebody like that.
I had an old friend in my life. He was 87, and he was truly my friend. Because it's been 15 years ago, and I still think about him from time to time. Yeah. That's how you know when he was a true friend.
Yeah, that's good.
And I was very young in my faith, and he was, like I say, in his late 80s. And I went to his front porch one day, and his name was Goral Thompson. I'll never forget him. And I said, Mr. Goral, I said, what's your best advice for a young man like me that just got married? And so it was 15 years ago, so I just got married. So I was probably 5-6 years in. And we were sitting on his front porch swinging. The breeze was blowing. He didn't say a word. And I just looked at him. And he didn't say a word. He just kept rocking. And about 5 minutes went by, silence. Him and I just rocking. He said, Tom, I've been thinking about what you asked me.
I had to wake up.
I said, well, okay, I figured you did. I just didn't want to interrupt what you were maybe wanting to say. And he gave some really good advice. And it wasn't but a few sentences on that topic, and then we moved on. But that's how you know you got a good friend, that he's willing to sit there and process and not just give you what
you want to hear,
what's going to fly off his mouth, the first thing pop off his head, or what I want to hear. Yeah. So that I totally agree with that. That is a huge important point of a friendship, having someone that you respect their opinion, you respect their feedback, you respect what they have to say about a specific topic, and just to know that you can go to that person and you can just get good advice. May not be advice that you want to hear if you're struggling with something, but you know you're going to get the right advice. So,
and I think even with that, there's another aspect to where I enjoy having friendships sometimes with guys that I know I'm gonna disagree with. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. Like at some point in your life, you might not be comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. But like, I'm at the point now where I remember through the years, I had some friendships that I would joke with them and say, you're my favorite liberal friend. You know what I mean? Because, you know what I mean? And they would be like, yeah, you're my favorite jerk friend, conservative, or whatever, And we just had that kind of back and forth. But honestly, I viewed them as friends, and I felt like they were, they were going to give me the truth, and I would walk away going, I still don't think you're right. Yeah. But I think that God sometimes puts those people in your life, and it's a good way to just kind of gauge. And I think it teaches us, too, about how to be people with grace and, definitely. And understand, we're all going to be at different places on some things, and the Holy Spirit can square all that up.
And I have family members that I love to death, and I would consider friends, but we completely disagree. We disagree in spiritual areas, and then there are other areas I could just grab them and kiss them on the cheek and hug them that we completely agree with. Sure. Yeah. And that's the beauty and dynamic about maturing and getting older, that you can value someone even though if you don't agree with them in everything. And once again, I think a little bit of life, a little bit of maturity helps go a long way on this specific area when it comes to friendship.
I had a man tell me the other day, we were having a conversation and we were talking about similar things, but I just remember him telling me, he said, you know what, John? He said, humility has got me a long way in life. And he's a little bit further along than me, and we were talking about a particular topic, and And I was like, yeah, I made the comment. I said, yeah, sometimes, man, I just play dumb on stuff, and it kind of just helps work some stuff out. And he said, I agree. He said, sometimes me being humble and just admitting I need some help. He said, like when in dealing with people or whatever, he said it's really gotten me a long ways in life. And I was like, man, that's pretty good advice because. But you don't learn that when you're 15 or 20, right? I mean, it took some while, and then you go, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And I can say that, like, as far as even in friendships, to be like, you know what, I can be humble, and say, you know what, I can let you be wrong, or I can let you disagree with me. Yeah. And we're okay. And humility can take you a long ways.
And being a humble person doesn't mean you have to be a doormat in a friendship. It's just realizing, okay, this person may have something to bring to the conversation or a perspective that I may not agree with, but maybe there's something I can glean out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe there's something I can see about me that I need to look around or look at me where can I be better? Yeah. So
good deal.
All right. So now making friends with someone at the age we're at, like I would consider us adults, right?
Yeah.
How hard, how easy is it to make friendships at this age, or what does it look different?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I just try not to be friends with anybody at this age. I'm over it. No, I'm just kidding. I've had enough. I got enough friends.
I'm capped out.
I'm maxed out.
Let them die off, and then I'll get
some more. Yeah, we'll fill back up. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, for me, I think probably. Most of us would say at the place where you're at, you're going to find friends where there's something like homogeneous going on, right? Like you're in the same place with your kids or same place with school or whatever. And I think that's probably true. Like I think that's just the way life is. But again, if you're content with there being a smaller circle, then it's not that big of a deal. If you're more about the quality of the friendship versus the quantity, right? And just saying, because I don't know, I think sometimes people just like we're living in a society where everything's based off how many likes, right? How many's in the friend group, how many's in the whatever the device is, right? So we check it. Like we want to know, like, is the list growing? And I'm like, but that's not the real world. Like I don't have 1,000 people that I'm that close with, right? Yeah. But according to social media, I might. Yeah. And that's just not real. And so I think the real thing is as we get older, we realize that. And so we try to invest in people. And I think, too, we invest in people at our age as we mature that don't just drain us, right? And some people are just consumers. Yeah. And they just want to consume all your energy.
Suck.
Yeah. Yeah, And I think part of me is like, I want to be able to have friendships with people that I think we're going to be mutually helping each other and whether it be in our family life or whatever. Yeah. And so maybe you're more selective. And I don't think it's a bad thing. No. Doesn't make it necessarily easier, but I don't think it's a bad thing.
And I think as you get older, you realize, okay, this type of personality I have. Yeah. I can't change that.
It's kind of set.
This is who I am, right? Yeah. I mean, Christ is molding and shaping, making me more like Him every day by His grace. But if you're trying to force something or putting a square peg in a round hole, it's just not going to work. Now, I'm not saying friendship doesn't take work, because it does take work. Right. It does take effort, but you can't make something happen that's just not in some way, shape, or form naturally taking place on some level. Yeah. But once again, there's effort. And my wife constantly reminds me of this. I'm a horrible, when it comes to following up somebody or sending text to people and things. I'm constantly working on that, right? And because once again, I'm the loner. I'm completely okay with that, but I have to push myself. And so I just tell you, if you're our age, trying to make friends, or just trying to be a friendly person, I think there it is, right? Being a person, and it just comes back to, here it is, John, being like Christ.
That's like following Jesus, yeah.
I mean, when you're a Christ follower, you're friendly to people, and you have a mindset of service, you just want to serve others, then friendships are naturally just going to take place. Some are going to be closer than others. And there's not this jockeying for position and why is he spending more time with him and that type of stuff that maybe happened in high school and in your 20s. I would hope that when you get our age, the mid 40s or late 40s, that you're past that type of stuff and you're realizing that, okay, I'm going to put some effort in here. Where's some people? That's how you and I met. We met. Our girls went to school together, and we were cheering for them on the volleyball court and on the soccer court, soccer field, and we just became friends.
Yeah.
And that naturally happened. I mean,
and then we ended up realizing, we have these common interests and things.
Yes.
And I think that just sort of builds,
Yeah, and that's how, I guess maybe that's the template for you. Maybe that's the answer. Just look for people who have common interests, but at the same time, don't shun somebody who's completely different than you. Because once again, as John said, sometimes those friendships can help you see a side of you that God needs you to see.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a good word.
Yeah. Maintaining long-term friendships, you know? And this is where I need to get better. And just talking about this topic makes me think of how I need
Convicts
to get better.
you.
Yeah, it convicts me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, for me, I've got a handful of guys that are probably long-term friends. The blessing of our generation, of course, is that it's easier than ever to stay in touch.
It is.
Had we had this conversation 30 years ago,
it'd be different.
It'd be different. You know, it was just more difficult. And so now, because I had this conversation with my girls the other day, we were talking, and it just blows their mind. There was a time where the internet was not, or there was a time where there wasn't a cell phone that was a computer,
Yeah.
And so and they were like asking questions like, that was before you even had a cell phone, Dad, that kind of thing. And it puts you in perspective generationally, where, we're now in that spot where they've never known a time where it was different.
Yeah.
And I'm like, back then, you had to write a letter, or you had to, physically go see someone. And so now I think communication is so much easier. So maintaining those friendships is a little bit easier. And I think for most guys, man, a check-in, kind of a text message thing is probably all it takes, right? I mean,
for me,
you know what I'm saying?
I'm just speaking for me. You can speak for you.
Yeah.
So there's two guys.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this elaborate text of 20 paragraphs. Hey, man, just checking in. How you doing, bro?
Yeah.
Love you, man. Or whatever. You know.
And I mean, honestly, I think just the way we're wired, like that's like, oh, that's cool, man. Like Tommy had me, Tommy was thinking about me, or he asked about my family, or whatever, And I think like that's one of the cool things that I think in our generation we're good with that. And that, but again, it's meaningful though. We had, I was telling you off the air, but just talking about how I've been doing some funeral things and things like that, and I've got guys that are like, oh yeah, man, I sent this guy a message or whatever, and then talking to the individual later, they're like, man, it was huge. It was a simple text message. It wasn't like they came to the house and brought a plate of food. It was just, man, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. Yeah. And so those are kind of the way I think friendships among guys. I had several men that I reached out to and was like, hey, try to touch base, and it was good to see that work out. So,
yeah, I've had some people say, but I've had them here in the studio just talking about this very topic, or talking about accountability and Christian brothers or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And they've said to me some things. And I didn't see me as doing a whole lot other than just making a phone call every 2-3 months, just because they were going through some hard stuff.
Yeah.
And just checking in. And even one guy didn't even pick up the phone most of the time. Just left them a voicemail, hey man, thinking about you, appreciate you, praying for you.
Yeah.
And they were saying that you're such a good friend. I was like, in my mind,
yeah, I'm the worst friend ever.
I'm the worst guy ever, man. If I'd have been going through what you'd been going through, hopefully you'd have been knocking on my door at my house,
Yeah,
But anyway, so for men, I don't think it takes a whole lot for us. Now I can't speak for every man, but I think example to this point you and I are talking about of just sending a quick text, making a quick phone call, leaving a quick silly voicemail, something, right?
Yeah, right.
I sent a very quick email one day to 3 females at the ministry, and I just didn't have a lot of time. Just sent a quick email, and next thing I know,
They misread your tone. I can tell you what happened.
I'm getting the email back. Tommy, why were you so short? I'm like, oh man, I didn't mean anything by it. I was in a hurry.
Too much estrogen.
But So I guess what we're saying here is know your audience and know who you're talking to. And we're telling most men we don't need a whole lot. We can grunt and communicate.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, I know you and I were doing building a project out here at the house.
Yeah.
And man, we didn't say a whole lot during the day. We had a few pockets of time, but a lot of our day was just work.
Yeah.
It
was good. It was good.
Yeah, it was. That's great stuff, man. Love that type of stuff. Yeah. And I think that type of stuff for me, that's when you build friendships. When you work together, spend time together. It doesn't need to have to be just an elaborate thing that you're communicating and talking about, because naturally, as you're working and doing things come up, topics come up, you get to talk about. So,
and I think most guys have the experience where there's an inside joke that you're still telling.
Yeah.
That happened 10 years ago.
15 years ago.
And it gets elaborate and it gets embellished and whatever else. But it's all because of doing nothing more than we were just hanging out.
Yeah.
And you remember that time you said this or you did this, and then the story gets retold and retold. And I think that's just kind of how we're wired. I don't know that ladies necessarily feel that way about They're like, that's not even funny. I mean, it was hilarious,
It was so funny.
And so, I've had trips with, I take a lot of trips where, I take men to conferences or we go to on mission projects. And, those are the best ones, man. You go out and you hang out for a week together and you come back and you still talk about it. And so I think that's kind of the way we're just wired. Guys are wired where those sorts of things are helpful to us. And I do think, as we were alluding to, I think that's part of what Christ does. He kind of wired us that way on purpose.
Well, let's also think through dealing with conflict. So let's say you got a friend. You guys have disagreed. Maybe you got a little heated in the conversation you had. All right, so let's kind of step in, put on counseling hats. How do we navigate through? Let's say somebody's got a friend right now. They've said some things they shouldn't have said. What are some steps we can give them, or some points we can give them to help them kind of navigate through this?
Yeah, I think that's a case where a text probably doesn't work.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah. Honestly, and I think that. Because, as we joked earlier, I mean, just like tone and inflection, none of that stuff matters in text. Yeah. But when you're dealing with conflict, it matters, right? And I tell people a lot of times, when you see somebody face to face and you're having to talk face to face, it really changes the dynamic of the conversation. And so, if your way of handling conflict is through text messages, I just think it's dangerous because, for one thing, they never disappear, right? And you'll say something bravely behind a keyboard or a text that you wouldn't say in face-to-face because you just know the consequence. And so I think that for men particularly, I would say, it would be wise to try to address a brother face-to-face. I mean, I think that's biblical, but nonetheless, I mean, if it's a big enough deal that it needs to be dealt with, then I think a personal conversation is where it starts anyway. Sure.
And I think in that conversation, there are probably 3 components at minimum here. You got good, clear communication to clear up anything that was misinterpreted or misunderstood. Yeah. And you got forgiveness, where you need to ask forgiveness if you said things that were wrong or out of place or hurtful. And then finally, it's a form of reconciliation. Okay, let's try to reconcile this thing and move on. Yeah, and I know for men, we don't have anywhere near as many words we need to use as women do. But at the same time, we do need to communicate when it comes to conflict like this. Let's just be honest. Let's just get things out on the table. Where forgiveness needs to be given. Do it, and let's move forward. And for me, one of the big things I try to do when I am dealing with a tense situation like this, whether I'm a mediator or whether I'm the one who's asking for forgiveness, let's bury the hatchet. That old saying, right? Bury the hatchet. I mean, it's biblical, right? That let's forgive. Let's move forward. Let's choose not to bring this back up. And
that's the fun part, bringing it back up for like a decade, right? Never letting it die. Yeah. And I think most guys, though, I think in my experience, most guys, if it comes to the point where we're like, all right, we're at a place where we can have this conversation. Yeah. I think most guys realize that they might still walk away saying, I'm still right, and the other guy thinks he's still right, and whatever else. But I do think that from a biblical perspective, it's going to do you individually better to at least be involved in the conversation, because part of what the scripture says in the book of Matthew is that before we bring our gift to the altar, if we've offended our brother, we go to our brother first, and then we go bring our gifts, what Jesus said. and there seems to be some issue where these broken relationships affect our worship. And for me, that's significant. And so I think there's broken worship going on where I'm over here praising Jesus, but I know I've got this really broken relationship that needs to be dealt with. And I think what Christ is saying is that, that's how big of a deal it is to him, is that, these things need to be healed. Now, of course, I would argue that that's done through the work of the gospel and those sorts of things. But nonetheless, I think just on a regular, a level basis that having that conversation is worth it. Yeah. And now, of course, certain situations may dictate different responses, consequences, things like that. But given what me and you are kind of getting at here today, the average run-of-the-mill, I got mad because you said something I didn't like, or you made a decision I didn't like. That kind of stuff is easily resolved if we'll just be, and it involves us humility and doing away with pride, right? Yeah. And saying, you know what, I'm humble enough to say I messed up or whatever. So. Yeah, and even if you're not a Christian listening to this, you can take these principles that John and I are talking about, the importance of clear communication, forgiveness, and reconciliation, and you can heal a relationship, right? Yeah. If you need to bring a mediator in to talk, you can do that, but. Right. The Christian principles work, even if you're not a Christian. Now, we long for you to be a Christian, to repent and believe the gospel and place saving faith in Christ so you can be forgiven for your sins and freed from judgment. But these principles still work nonetheless. That's right. So now let's talk about the quintessential friend. Yeah. Jesus Christ, right? Yeah, yeah. He said, no greater love than this, that man lay down his life for his friends. Yeah. So he looked at the people that he spent time with were his friends. Mm. And so what are some of the things that we see with Jesus that we could pull from the text or from the conversations that we know from the Bible that says, okay, this makes a good friend? Yeah. One of the things that I think has to be clear about Christ, and we're trying to read between the lines because we're 2,000 years removed. Sure. But he was absolutely approachable. Like there was no air about him, right? That you go, no arrogance, you go, I probably can't go talk to that guy. Yeah. Here's a guy who, the Scripture describes wherever he's going, even in his humble state of the incarnation. He's going through towns and villages, and people just want to be around him. Just hang out. So there was something about him that was approachable, and I don't think that was fabricated. It was just part of his nature, right? And so as we try to, we seek after being conformed into his image, right? Then I think part of that has to be true of us. If we want to be really good friends, I think we have to make ourselves approachable and ask the Holy Spirit to lead us in that. But I think that was one of the most glaring things you see in his life is that you don't see examples in the New Testament of people going, man, he ran me off, or he threw me aside, or I'm too busy, or I'm too powerful. You know what I mean? It was like, he was just an approachable guy. Yeah. So you could be asking yourself, are you an approachable person? Yeah. Are you someone? Do you have in your mind, well, I'm just an elite person and I'm only going to hang out with a certain type of person? I can promise you you're not approachable. So humble yourself a little bit and realize you're not that important, and get out there and spend some time with people. I'm not saying that you are a very important person. Don't misunderstand me here, but at the same time, have the form of humility that Christ had, where anyone could come up to him. A woman who was bleeding for 10 years just touches his robe and he stops. Yeah. He stops everything, and that was a massive crowd around him at that time to spend time and talk to her. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I see, he just spent time with people. Yeah, 100%. He was available. Not only was he approachable. Oh, we're going to preach a sermon. Oh, boy, here we go. He's approachable. He's available. Oh, there's 2 A's. Now it's on me to figure out a third one. Man. So he's approachable. I'm sure we can come up with one very quick, but he's available, and he's spending time with this woman who's had this huge bleeding issue for over 10 years, and he spent time with her. Yeah. Another thing we see with Christ is that he went through the good and bad with his friends. Yeah. He didn't check out. Now they checked out on him, right? Yeah. So there definitely was a friendship. He was bringing something to the friendship that they didn't have, right? He was bringing omniscience and being the God-man. But yes, he spent time with them. He went through the good and bad with them. He was able to give his insight, his input into any situation. Yeah, and you see him celebrating with them,
Yeah.
and you also see him grieving. You think about the story of Lazarus,
Yeah.
and here who the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, right? And it's at that scene where his dear friend has died.
Wow.
And he's still connected to the family. You know what I mean? And so you look at that and you go, man, what kind of a friend is this guy? Well, he's a guy he's not distant, man. He's there.
Yeah.
And he goes and visits, and of course that's a whole other biblical account. But
Yeah.
but the point is that he was there weeping there. There's other times he's celebrating with these guys when they have something. They come back and he sends them out on a missionary journey, and he says, "All right, come back, tell me what happened." And they're like, "Oh, we did this." I mean, he's celebrating with them.
Yeah.
Tell me what God did. And so we see him on both sides, and I think that's part of what it would be to be a good male friend, to say, I can be there with you in both times.
I can rejoice when you rejoice. I can mourn when you mourn.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I think about Jesus and being a friend, I can't help but think about Peter when in one breath Peter is stating who Jesus Christ is in Matthew 16 through 18.
Right.
And then in just a few verses later,
I don't know
Jesus is calling him Satan.
Yeah.
But Peter needed to hear that at the time.
Yeah.
Right. He needed to be corrected. And so there's another component to friendship we've already talked about. Having that accountability, having that availability, having that approachability to have someone in your life that just wants to correct you when they know you're wrong.
Yeah, that's a good word.
And it's very, very important. And then the ultimate friendship of Christ is he was willing to lay his life down for his friends.
Yeah.
And that's commitment. That's a commitment to a friendship. That's commitment to a group of people. For all of us who believe that Jesus Christ can be called our friend. And that's a statement that I often ponder, to think that the God of all the universe is my friend.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the cross scene, Jesus is demonstrating his love, but he's also making the availability for enemies to become friends. They're his enemies, and there on, one side of the cross is a guy dying who says, "I reject you." And the other side, there's a guy saying, "Hey, I'm with you, man." And so there's Roman soldiers surrounding, there's crowds and mobs, and yet Jesus is dying, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And so you see this transaction that takes place, that those of us who are enemies can then become friends. So the fact that we could even become, in not only in the family, but become friends, it is mind blowing. And that was, the ultimate example was in Christ.
Amen.
And so I think as we're, if we're guys who are good friends, and we try to follow that pathway, and we mimic those things by the power of the Holy Spirit, then God's got the potential to change our relationships with other people, right? The people that we would consider maybe against us or enemies to us, or they've been antagonistic, but if Christ can do that for those folks, and if we're following him, man, maybe he can change those relationships we have. So there's that potential. There's a power in that,
Yeah. Any closing comments before we just review and start talking about a little bit of application?
No, man, I think we're good.
So Jesus is the quintessential friend. He is the man of all men. And we looked at his life. He was approachable. He was available. He was able to give wisdom and correction when needed.
Yeah.
He was willing to die for his friends. And we talked about navigating conflict, right? Being able to communicate clearly, forgive, reconcile, and move on. We also talked importance about understanding the season of life that you're in with friendships, and understanding that friendships here at 40 or 50 or 60 look a little different than they did when you're in your late teens or early 20s. We talked about the importance of being there, of having not 15 or 20 or 25 close friends, but having close friends that you can count on your hand, somebody that as you said, who am I going to call at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? And looking and understanding that type of friendship is very important to have, and not to try to force something. Friendship is going to take work, right? But at the same time, friendships are built and last because you guys have things in common.
Right.
I'm not saying that you can't be a friend with someone that you don't have a lot in common, but the odds of you being close friends probably not going to be very, very high. And also at the same time, that don't push off someone who's completely different than you, because you may become friends. May not be like a close, intimate friend, but at the same time, you can learn something from that person. And they can learn something from you. So, and that also ties back into our last point to enemies becoming friends.
Yeah.
Right? You never know that God may be doing something in this person's life. This person that may be opposing you may be the person who's going to be your friend in the next year or two. So,
yeah, imagine that, right?
Imagine that.
Only God can do that.
Only God. Only God. So friendships are important. Friendships do take work. Do you have any closing comments, John?
Nope, I just appreciate your friendship, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to be a friend with you also. Yeah, and realize, I also want to reiterate this, that if you're a male, you don't need to put burdens on yourself to be this perfect friend. Always try to be better.
Yeah.
But hey, sometimes a text, a quick voicemail is just what somebody needs. Don't underestimate the small things, because the small things can be really, really big things to a man, especially independent men who are movers and shakers, who have tons of things going on. Sometimes that text or that voicemail or that email just means the world to them.
Yeah.
So don't forget it.
That's right, man.
All right.
Good work.
Go out and don't be a pansy. Be a good friend.
That's right.
All right. See you guys next time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.